First of all, I'd like to thank the Executive Committee for all the hard work they've done in getting this body together. It's really a truly incredible feat for us all to be here today. I did want to sound a note of caution that I'm hearing a lot of words of fear. I keep hearing that word a lot. And so I would caution that we write our rules not based on fear, but based on strength. Because we are sovereign bodies. We created the federal government, not the other way around. And so I would urge that point of view when you go into these committees this afternoon, and have confident assurance that we will provide the groundwork for future conventions or a convention of the states, an Article 5 convention. There are a lot of folks out there that are spreading fear, and I think a lot of the fear comes from the fact that there are some people that profit from the status quo. I did want to just mention something going backwards to aggregatable. What is an aggregatable application? Well, Congress has a ministerial duty to call in time and place. Nothing else is left to the discretion of that body. However, it does have to be 34 applications on the same topic. However, if Congress does not call the convention and we as a body or convention decide that we do have 34 aggregatable applications, there are some folks out there that will defend that pro bono. There are think tanks and groups that will litigate that. Of course, we can expect an equal and opposite team to litigate that back, because I'm pretty sure Washington doesn't want to change Washington. I'm fairly sure. But one other note I just wanted to bring up. There may be some caution in calling a convention of states a legislative body, because a convention, unlike a legislature, is an inherently temporary body that expires with the completion of its mission. So I appreciate what we're doing here today, and what this executive committee has done is essentially we are laying the groundwork. So it would be nice to see some kind of model resolution or legislation that we can bring back to our states so we can continue to build on that groundwork. Because we don't know exactly when a convention of states is going to be called. Is it next year? Is it 2 years from now? Is it 10? Is it 20? Gosh, I hope not. But it will lay the groundwork so that states can be comfortable sending legislators and hit the ground running, so we can propose an amendment that will be sent to the states for ratification. So thank you so much, and thank you so much again to the committee.
I'd like to come forward, please do so. We've got probably about 20 minutes left. I know there's a couple of other folks who want to speak before we stop. Did you want to, Chris? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. I know the length of time, somebody brought up time as far as how long our resolution's open for. That's something that Judiciary will actually be talking through, so we'll be defining that. One other thing, and I just wanted to tell you my quick experience when I went to Congress on this, and I was supposed to have met with a congressman and their top attorney in it's called the Congressional Research Service. My flight got delayed, so I missed the meeting, but he still had the meeting, and then afterwards, me and him sat down, and he kind of walked me through, here's our discussion, and I had already read the papers. There's 2 different papers Congressional Research Service has done on this. I've read them both, so I kind of knew what he was saying, but in the conversation, it was really striking because he kept saying, well, Congress is going to do this, and Congress is going to do this, and I said, well, you don't have any authority to do that. And he looked at me, and he smiled, and he said, Chris, Congress does whatever they want. And he said, I know you don't like to hear that, but Congress will do whatever we want. And that's the reality of the situation. So it was just an interesting discussion that we know we're dealing with issues here, but that's why we have to be so cautious as we proceed through. And the senator from Utah got up here and said, build that seawall. It's going to take some time to do that. We have to make sure we do it the right way. This is the Constitution. It's not going to be anything that's quick and easy. This is going to be heavy lifting of heavy stones and the mortar and time. So I wanted to emphasize that.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Ken Ivory from Utah. I'm deeply grateful to be here. I appreciate all that's been said. We're here by oath. We've sworn an oath under Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. as officers of that document, not of a body of men, but of that document that secures and protects our rights. We are validly charged officers. I was very impressed to be at the National Archive 2 summers ago and to see that document laid out. And Article 1, of course, lays out the powers and the rights of Congress, and Article 2, the powers and the rights of the President, Article 3, the powers and the rights of the courts, and Article 4 lays out the powers and the rights of the states. And then Article 5 deals with how to amend and deal with the process. But the 4 branches of government are often forgotten. I think at the outset of our labor, it would be good to remember what the Supreme Court reminded us less than 2 years ago. They said that the general power of governing is possessed by the states, but not the federal government. They said that the independent power of the states serves as a check on the arbitrary power of the federal government. They said that in the typical case, we look to the states to defend their prerogatives by adopting the simple expedient of not yielding to federal blandishments when they do not want to embrace federal policies as their own. And then they closed the federalism section of their opinion by stating something that I think we should take to heart in the heavy lifting that we have to do, because no one is coming to our rescue, and this is a duty that falls to us by oath and by design. They said that states are separate and independent sovereigns. Sometimes they have to act like it. And this is the greatest act that we can take right now, because we know how serious it is. We know the trajectory. History tells us where these things go, and would simply admonish us that we understand we are here as actors under oath to act like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gordon Ullery from New Hampshire. We were fortunate in New Hampshire to get a balanced budget amendment passed. It took a lot of discussion and convincing within the caucus, and you actually had some bipartisan support. That's a kind of a event that both sides will look at. Many of our states have balanced budget amendments, and we know what it is. New Hampshire operates under one, and occasionally the speaker has to go over and take the pendulum off the clock, and we get to stay there until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, normally on the very last day of session. And it's warm, because we, unlike this chamber, don't have air conditioning. Of course, our chamber is a little bit larger, too. Laying the foundation for this is going to take a great deal of education. And one of the committees that was not mentioned was an education type committee. While we can set up the rules and we can talk to our neighbors and we can talk to our friends in either NCSL or ALEC or even the other one, CSG, it's going to take public understanding. We've got 2 groups downstairs with their signs, Save Our Constitution. Well, that's exactly what we're doing, is we're trying to save the Constitution. And the powers that are inherent there, the reserved powers in the 10th and 9th articles, where the power is reserved to the states and to the people. A lot of people don't understand what that Constitution is. And as part of a convention of the states, we're going to have to teach in our own states to our colleagues in the chambers, both House and Senate, except for Kansas, they only have one, what it means to be a state again. It isn't being taught in school. Well, looking around the room, there's only 1 or 2 people that probably didn't have civics when you were taught the Constitution, when you were taught all of the elements that are contained therein. So we're going to have to do this as well as create rules and procedures and policies and delegate assignments and delegate rules. Indiana mentioned its resolution. It would be great if we had copies of that, so we could take them back and as filing comes up, and if many of us are reelected, we can reintroduce those. The the research services information would be nice to have disseminated widely so that it can be used in arguments. And I would hope that we could create here, perhaps on this weekend, a speakers bureau, as to speak, that can go out and argue with individuals. Many of you are familiar with St. Anselm College and the presidential debates. They have an Institute of Politics and would be glad to house or to support such an activity. If not them, we have others. And right now, New Hampshire happens to get a lot of focus. So we got Scott Brown, and in a couple of years, a whole bunch of people are going to be coming around giving us money, which is good. So I would ask the delegation here to consider those activities as well as the ones that we have considered thus far. Thank you.
Those are excellent remarks, and what I want to emphasize here is the education portion of this. It is covered, but not as well as you described it. We have a committee that we established here today called Planning, Communication, and Finance. Now, those aren't all three the same thing, but the reason why they're all in one committee is we've only had so many people step forward and say they're willing to co-chair and take on responsibility. So we know rules and procedure are important, we know judiciary is important, but really those three things are three different committees. The planning portion of that is where is the next event of the Assembly of State Legislatures going to take place? Is it going to be in Washington? Is it going to be in Santa Fe, New Mexico? What is the best, and who's going to organize that and communicate with the local leaders to get all of that done? Finances, how are we going to pay for all of this? You know, we have to have staff, we got to make copies, we got to do all of the other things. We can't just expel. Maybe David Long will continue to write checks to pay for all of this, I'm not sure. But so we need to know how we're going to do that. Establish an organization where money can be contributed to pay for the costs of what we're doing. And the communications part is partially what the representative was discussing, was how do we tell people what we're doing? Because we can meet all we want, if no one knows it, it doesn't really matter. We're not accomplishing anything. So there are probably half a dozen or more committees really that can be created. And part of that is waiting for someone in this room, or perhaps somebody who couldn't make it, to step forward and say, hey, I'm interested in helping plan the next event. I'm interested, I know nobody likes to fundraise, so I'm not going to say that, but I'm interested in accumulating materials to distribute to folks or going around the states. It's one of the things we were doing by phone. I had a list of about a dozen speakers and presidents around, and I was calling them. And some of them returned my calls right away, some of them didn't. But we need people to reach out and really get people involved, because some of this is people don't like the idea, but most of the folks who aren't here or haven't pointed is they just didn't get around to it, or they didn't know it was important, or it's just one more body that I'm appointing something, and they don't know how important it is. So think about whether you want to serve on those committees, and we can certainly think about breaking some of those up in the next day or two, or over the next several months. Gary, you had some remarks you wanted to make, or David, I'm sorry. Or Gary, go ahead.